from the Mediterranean all the way to what is today Pakistan.
And a lot more to them than just those, the typical Mongol,
The horde.
yeah, the sweeping in and burning everything. There's nuance here.
Big time. And we're going to uncover all of that nuance thanks to this awesome article you've dug up.
It really does change how you think about the Mongols. They weren't just conquerors. They were empire builders, patrons of the arts even.
Religious converts even.
Yeah, exactly.
It's going to be wild. So let's set the stage. 1200s.
Okay.
Genghis Khan's armies, they've swept across Asia. They've made it to Persia.
Right.
And his grandson
Hulagu, yeah.
gets the task of basically going further west, keep expanding the empire. So if you were in Hulagu's shoes, what's your strategy? You got to take new territory. What do you do?
Well, I think most people would assume, right, just total scorched earth.
Yeah, brutal.
Brutal. But the Ilkhanate, it's different, right? It's more complex than that. Like, take the fall of Baghdad in 1258. I mean, that's a huge turning point, right? It kind of overshadows the rest of the Ilkhanate's history because it was brutal. I mean, it marked the end of the Abbasid Caliphate, 500-year-old caliphate.
A major power.
Yeah, in the Islamic world. But it was also strategic. Hulagu needed to show he was in charge. And what better way to do that than to conquer, basically the symbolic heart of the Islamic world.
You got to make a statement.
Yeah.
So, I mean, can you imagine?
How were the shockwaves?
Yeah, like the region must have been just reeling. But I mean, the Mongols didn't stop there, right?
No, they didn't. They just kept going west until, they ran into someone who could actually stand up to them.
Who was that?
The Mamluks.
Ah, okay.
The Mamluks of Egypt. The Battle of Ain Jalut, 1260.
This is big.
Big turning point. It marks the furthest point west the Mongol Empire ever got.
So they just, stopped him. The Mamluks, nope, you're done.
Ain Jalut's super important for understanding how the Ilkhanate developed. Yeah. It wasn't just a loss, militarily. It really set up this huge rivalry between the Ilkhanate and the Mamluks. They're going to be fighting for control of the region for, decades.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing. Unlike other parts of the Mongol Empire, the Ilkhanate wasn't actually set up by Genghis Khan himself.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. It was almost like Hulagu saw a chance, took it, and then got the okay from his brother, Kublai Khan, who was the great Khan at the time, the leader of all the Mongols.
Oh, so there's family drama going on here too. It's not just conquest, it's alliances and backstabbing maybe.
Exactly. It's complicated.
Okay, so that's the internal Mongol family situation. But what about all the other Mongol groups, all the other Khanates out there? How did they deal with each other?
Ooh, their relationships. Very complex, let's just say. They liked Yuan China, which is Mongol-ruled China.
Yeah.
Just so everybody knows.
Just a refresher.
But then, big rivals with the Golden Horde, they're up north. And the Chagadades over in the east. Imagine this giant chessboard across Eurasia, and every Khanate's maneuvering for power,
So not one big happy Mongol family reunion.
Not exactly, no. Lots of tension.
Okay, so we've got our Mongol Khans, we've got this massive empire. What about the people actually living under their rule? What was life like for them?
This is where it gets really, really interesting. Because the Ilkhanate wasn't just straight up Mongol domination. It was this hybrid empire. They blended the Mongol military power with Persian administration, all that know-how.
So they didn't just burn everything down and start from scratch.
Nope. Hulagu, he was a conqueror, but he was smart. He saw how good the Persian bureaucracy was, how organized it was, and he kind of kept it, incorporated it into his own way of ruling.
Pragmatic.
Yeah, very. Why reinvent the wheel?
Exactly.
Just put a Mongol spin on it.
So he's using local advisors then.
Big time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like the Juwayni brothers.
Okay.
They were this powerful Persian family, generations of government experience.
Yeah.
And then there's this guy, Nasir al-Din al-Tusi, one of the most brilliant minds of the 13th century.
Okay.
And he was a top advisor to Hulagu himself.
Was that a normal thing for a Mongol ruler to just bring in a local expert, or was Hulagu way ahead of the curve here?
I think it shows he was really, really smart, actually. He knew that if you want to rule effectively, you got to understand the people and the systems that are already there.
Makes sense.
And Tusi, this guy, he was an astronomer, mathematician, philosopher, theologian. He did it all.
Wow.
He even started this incredible observatory at Moraga. It was this hub for scholars. They came from all over Eurasia.
That's so cool.
Right. Like right in the heart of what you think of as, this warrior-dominated empire. You have this center of learning
It's not what you expect.
that flips the script, right?
Truly.
The Mongols as patrons of knowledge,
Yeah, that's not the typical story you hear. So
Right.
we're already seeing a different side to these guys. But I mean, I have a feeling there's a lot more to unpack here.
Oh, yeah. This hybrid empire, this was a work in progress. There's power struggles, there's threats from the outside, and even some religious conversions that are going to, like, completely shake things up.
Sounds juicy.
It is.
I'm ready for more. Okay, so last time we were talking about the Ilkhanate, and it was this really interesting mix of Mongol military power, right?
Right.
And Persian administration. This whole idea of a hybrid empire. But empires don't tend to stay stable, do they?
Not really, no.
What happens after Hulagu? Do his successors just, like, keep things going?
Well, so his son, Abaka, he takes over. And immediately he's dealing with all this pressure from the Golden Horde and the Chagadates. Can you imagine? Looking north, looking east, always worried about your Mongol rivals.
Yeah, that's a lot to deal with.
He even tried to team up with the European Crusaders to take on the Mamluks. But that alliance never really happened.
So much for Christian-Mongol cooperation. Was Abaka at least able to keep the Ilkhanate unified, like, internally?
For a while, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
His reign was mostly about consolidating power,
Mm-hmm.
But then his brother, Ahmad Teguder, he becomes the Ilkhan, and things get a little interesting.
Oh.
He converts to Islam.
Whoa, hold on. A Khan embracing Islam. What?
It was a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I bet.
Teguder, he starts favoring Muslim advisors, tries to make peace with the Mamluks. But the Mongol elite, not happy about this at all.
Oh, so, like, embracing the local culture and religion, not a winning strategy, seems kind of smart to me. What went wrong?
Well, I mean, he gets removed from power, right?
Oh, wow.
Medieval politics were brutal.
No kidding. So, who takes over then?
Abaka's son, Argun, and his reign. It's crazy. Full of court intrigue, assassinations, like Game of Thrones, but in 13th century Persia.
Okay, now you've got my attention.
One of the most interesting things about Argun's reign is this guy, Rabban Sama, a Nestorian monk from Beijing. And he serves as Argun's envoy to the Pope and European kings.
Wait, a monk from Beijing representing a Mongol Khan in Europe? This is wild.
Right. Talk about a cultural exchange.
Seriously, what was the point of this whole mission?
Argun wanted to create an alliance against the Mamluks. He thought, if he could get the Europeans on his side, they could attack together and finally defeat them.
Makes sense. Did it work?
Nope. Just like everyone before him, he couldn't get that European alliance going. And at home, he's dealing with rebellions and invasions from those other Mongol Khanates.
So, not a very peaceful time to be in charge.
Not at all.
It sounds like the Ilkhanate was constantly on the verge of falling apart, both from the outside and from within, like their own internal struggles. Was there ever a time when things were actually, like, stable and good?
That's a great question. It brings us to Ghazan, Argun's son. He comes to power in 1295. His reign, it's considered like the peak of the Ilkhanate.
Really? What made it so great?
He converted to Islam.
Oh, wow. Like, really converted.
He made it the official religion of the Ilkhanate.
Wow. So this is bigger than Teguder's conversion.
Much bigger, yeah. It changes everything.
But did he just, like, completely abandon his Mongol roots then?
That's what's so fascinating about Ghazan. He was both, a devout Muslim, but still a Mongol warlord. He persecuted Buddhists, but he also continued those diplomatic relations with Europe.
He's, like, walking a tightrope.
He really is, trying to balance these two identities,
Yeah. That must have been hard. You mentioned something earlier about Ghazan and paper money.
Oh, yeah. His big economic experiment.
So how'd that go?
Inspired by the Yuan dynasty in China, he decides, hey, let's try paper money here.
Bold move.
Total disaster.
Oh, wow.
The economy tanks. Nobody trusts the system. They get to scrap the whole thing.
Not exactly the legacy you want, I guess.
Not really, no. But besides that, he actually did try to reform things,
Right.
with his advisor, Rashid al-Din, a brilliant historian. They worked to boost the economy, agriculture, trade.
Trying to stabilize things.
Exactly. Whether it really worked is still up for debate, but they definitely put in the effort.
So Ghazan, devout Muslim reformer who also happened to be a Mongol warlord, what a character. But he seems to have had a real impact on the Ilkhanate. What happens next? So we left off with Ghazan, the Ilkhan, who converted to Islam and really tried to reform the empire. What happens after him? Does this, like, new direction for the Ilkhanate, does it stick? Do things keep getting better?
Well, his brother, Jakuti, he kind of keeps things going, yeah. His reign is pretty peaceful. He solidifies the Ilkhanate's control, expands trade with China and India, and even adopts Shi'ism.
Hold on, wait. Another religious shift. So we went from Buddhism to Sunni Islam to now Shi'ism. That's like three major religions in what, just a few decades?
Yeah, the Ilkhanate was a real melting pot. All these cultures and religions bumping up against each other is kind of what makes them so fascinating. And Iljetu, he even builds this incredible new capital at Sultania.
A new capital. That's a big statement. Was it like a normal thing for Mongol rulers to do? To just, pick up and move the center of power?
It was a way to, make their mark, put their own stamp on the empire, but unfortunately, this golden age, it doesn't last forever.
There's always a but, isn't there?
Right. So Iljetu's son, Abu Sa'id, takes over.
Huh.
And here's the tragic part. He comes to power when he's just 12 years old.
Oh, no.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
A 12-year-old running an empire?
That's rough.
He was basically a puppet for all these powerful commanders who were really calling the shots.
And I'm guessing this didn't end well for the Ilkhanate.
It did not. Abu Sa'id dies young, no heir. And the year is 1335. And that basically triggers a power vacuum that the empire just can't recover from.
So that's it. All that power, all that like blending of cultures.
Yeah.
Just gone.
The unified Ilkhanate. Yeah, that's pretty much the end. But it's important to remember that the Mongols, they didn't just vanish from Persia. They actually ended up integrating into the local population, blending in with Persian and Turkish communities.
Integrating, was that like a peaceful thing, or was there a lot of conflict?
It's complicated. I mean, there were definitely tensions. As different groups tried to grab power after the Ilkhanate collapsed, you had Persian dynasties reasserting themselves in southern Iran. And in Anatolia, you have the rise of new powers, like the early Ottomans.
It's crazy how fast things can change. Empires fall apart, new ones rise up. But you mentioned something about the Ilkhanate's legacy. Like, what actually survived all this chaos?
Well, this is where we have to really challenge that image of the Mongols as just destroyers, right? Because the Ilkhanate was a golden age for Persian art, science, and literature.
Really? In the middle of all this political turmoil, how is that even possible?
The Ilkhans themselves, a lot of them were huge patrons of the arts. They funded scholarship, they commissioned these amazing works of art. Plus, because their empire was so vast, it connected all these different cultures, China, Europe, you name it. And that created this incredible exchange of ideas and artistic styles.
So they weren't just like borrowing from Persian culture, they were adding to it, blending in their own influences.
Exactly. You see this fusion everywhere, from the architecture to those beautiful Persian miniatures, which often have these elements of Chinese and Buddhist art.
So instead of trying to wipe out Persian culture, they actually helped it flourish.
In a way, yeah. And there's one work that really shows this. Rashid al-Din's Compendium of Chronicles, we talked about him before. This was one of the first attempts at a world history. And it used sources from China, India, the Islamic world, even Europe.
Sounds like a pretty ambitious project.
It really was. And it shows just how cosmopolitan the Ilkhanate was. So yeah, the Mongols, they were more than just barbarians. They had a huge impact on Persia.
Yeah.
And not just through conquest.
What about their political legacy? Like, did the Ilkhanate actually change anything in the long run?
I think it did, yeah. Because by embracing Persian culture, by using their administrative systems, the Ilkhans actually helped to revive this idea of a distinct Iranian identity within the Islamic world.
Because Persia had been under Arab rule for centuries.
Exactly. But under the Ilkhans, this idea of being Persian starts to make a comeback, and that's going to have a huge influence on later dynasties.
So the Ilkhanate wasn't just some random blip in history. It actually helped shape how Persia and even the Islamic world developed.
Absolutely. Oh, and one more thing. Even some of their administrative stuff, like the Kishik, those elite Mongol military units, they stuck around in Persia long after the Ilkhanate was gone.
So they left behind their art, their architecture, and even some of their military structures.
It's all connected.
Yeah.
The Ilkhanate is this perfect example of how conquest and cultural exchange can, go hand in hand, and how that can lead to some really unexpected outcomes.
It really makes you think, what if things had gone differently? What if Abu Sa'id had lived longer? would we even be talking about the Ilkhanate today?
It's one of those big what ifs in history, right?
For sure. Well, I think we've officially busted the myth of the Mongols as just, these mindless destroyers. The Ilkhanate was complicated, it was fascinating, and it definitely left its mark on the world. Thanks to you, I've got a whole new perspective on them. And for our listeners, if you want to delve deeper into this period, definitely check out Rashid al-Din's Compendium of Chronicles. It's a journey through world history unlike any other.
I second that. Or just, Google some of those Ilkhanate Persian miniatures.
Yeah.
They are stunning.
Until next time, keep on learning.
Right.